بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Good morning and thank you for joining us today in the discussion panel titled The Importance of Human Capital in Entrepreneurship, Education and University. First, I would like to thank King Salman Institute for Entrepreneurship as well as King Saud University for organizing this very important event and for inviting me to moderate this very special panel. So to start with, I would like to talk about the entrepreneurship process. So the entrepreneurship process is in creating new ventures starts with individuals. Individuals who have the capability and the ability to recognize an opportunity, to initiate an idea, and to bring together all the components in an entrepreneurship process. Hence, human capital is a key factor in the success and the growth of a venture. And whenever we want to make a greatest impact or a change in human capital, we start with education. Therefore, we're witnessing a radical and global focus on entrepreneurship education around the world, driven by a millennial generation who are more flexible, resilient, and adaptable. Driven by a world and a workplace who is becoming increasingly unpredictable, and driven by governments who start believing that entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs who are the ones who solve our social and economic problems. So I believe that we have reached an agreement that there have never been before a need for entrepreneurs to drive socioeconomic development, innovation, and job creation. Entrepreneurship today is turning from luxury to survival in some countries that rely on SMEs. And if we look at ours in Saudi Arabia, entrepreneurship is becoming high in government agenda because it proved its socio-economic impact. With that, we are hoping that the panel discussion, as the panelists as well as questions from the audience, can create a better understanding of entrepreneurship education. What do we need to teach? How can we teach entrepreneurship education? Shall we make it required as a mainstream in our education system? And what external factors will affect the success of entrepreneurship education in achieving its intended outcomes? Today we have a distinguished panel from private, government, and academia. So I would like to start with Ms. Amal Dukhan on the left. So Ms. Amal is the director of Babson Global Center for Entrepreneurship Leadership, for Entrepreneurial Leadership. Amal is also a certified trainer in design innovation and change management. She has a bachelor degree in education and master in strategic marketing from the University of Wollongong. She also has a number of executive certificates from Stanford and MIT. Also on my left, Mr. Talal Al-Ajlan. Mr. Talal is the Deputy Director General for Enablement and Creativity Sector in the Human Resource Development Fund. Mr. Al-Ajlan holds a bachelor degree in law and a diploma in financial planning. He has over 20 years experience in leading positions in major Saudi and regional enterprises. Also, we have Dr. Kathy Gartner. Dr. Kathy is an expert in innovation and social and economic development with background in knowledge-based innovation. She currently holds a number of advisory and non-executive roles, both nationally and internationally. She is the Chief Executive of Manchester Knowledge Capital, and previously Kathy headed the Technology and Knowledge Transfer Office at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. Last but not least, Professor Justin. Professor Justin has recently been named as one of the most influential scientific minds worldwide by Thomson Reuters. He has also been named as one of the top 100 leading professors in the field of entrepreneurship. He is the scientific director of Erasmus Center of Entrepreneurship, so did I pronounce it well? And he also acts as a research consultant, speaker, and external advisor to a number of companies and government agencies. So welcome. Yeah. Kathy, I would like to start with a question. So, talking about entrepreneurship education, so what exactly do we mean by entrepreneurship education? Some would argue that entrepreneurship education is about teaching the mindset, which is resilience, risk management, team playing, and others would argue that entrepreneurship education is about creating and running actual business. And before I hear Kathy, before I hear your review, I would like to listen to the audience. So we would, let's start a mini vote, please. Who believes that entrepreneurship education is about teaching the mindset? I would like to see hands here. So entrepreneurship education is about teaching the mindset. Okay, so we're talking about 4 or 5 hands. Now, on the other hand, who believes that entrepreneurship education is about teaching, creating, and running actual businesses? Okay, so, and the rest? Okay, so I think we're talking about 50-50, and probably more are leaning toward running businesses. And I can understand, I mean, we're talking about an urgency of finding solutions for unemployment and diversifying the economy. So Kathy, do you think that teaching the mindset is enough? Can we have a mic here, please?
You can hear me now.
Yes.
I thought the poll was really interesting. 50-50 would be exactly my answer, because I think it's the mindset and the knowledge to create businesses and run businesses. I don't think it's an either or, but I do think that if you do not give opportunities to create the mindset, I think it is not sufficient to be able to run a company. And these two very different skills have to be part of what we're talking about in entrepreneurial education. I think in some senses it's a false dichotomy. They're both necessary. But there's a big difference in how you support and encourage the development of an entrepreneurial mindset, and you also teach the strategic skills, the strategic knowledge, the management skills to grow the business. And I think that the key thinking skills are different. But in any one business, it is quite likely that the leading entrepreneur will have to use both of those types of skills to make that a success. And I'm very interested in a very old article that probably no one here has read, by Sarah Sarasvathy, who talks about these two different ways of thinking. First, she calls it effectual reasoning, but I like to think about it as exploring. So initially the mindset has to want to explore, and I think David's presentation earlier said an entrepreneur will see a problem out there and want to find a way to solve it. And to create that willingness to explore, to think about how you can make that difference, I think stimulating that is really important in entrepreneurial education. And then we get what Sarasvathy calls causal reasoning, which she refers to it being like great generals who have a business, have a plan, have a strategy, have tactics, have the resources, and then go out and win in the business. You need both of these. And personally, I like to think it more like an analogy I'm very struck in the presentation we just heard about lots of ingredients in the ecosystem, and it made me think about recipes. And I think in terms of, if you think about these two different sides of the mindset, the first one, if you were going to have a surprise visit and need to cook a meal or make a dinner for someone, the entrepreneurial and exploratory mindset would open the cupboard and see what's in there and create a wonderful dish or a wonderful feast. The causal and reasoned and thinking mindset would say, I know a recipe, I will go out and get all the ingredients and make that. Does that kind of give you a sense of the different skills that I think both of these need to be, if not taught, but encouraged in entrepreneurial learning?
Interesting. Thank you. So probably the hands which we didn't see were voting for both, really both the mindset as well as running the business. Amal, the next question is for you. So China, Malaysia, as well as, if I believe, Babson College, made the entrepreneurship education compulsory in their tertiary level. So in Saudi Arabia, and this time in specific, do you think that entrepreneurship education should be compulsory or optional in our education system, and why? And again, before I take your question, I would like to hear from the audience. So we have a vote here. Do you think that the entrepreneurship education need to be compulsory in our system? I need to see hands. Okay, optional? Okay, so we're leaning towards compulsory. Amal, what do you think?
Yeah. I think the hands that said optional are leaning towards democracy and having the option to say no, right? So my question would be for that group is, why not? Right? And why not have it there? So when I look at entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education, I think it's a right that everyone needs to have the option to. And if I don't really give you the chance to experience it, because you don't know what's there, and if I have the option, I might skip it, right? And I don't know really how far I will be missing if I skip that. Like, why do we have to teach all the maths compulsory? Why do we have to teach all the languages compulsory? And then we leave the life skills on the side to be taught after university when we go back to the workplace and we realize, oh, we don't know how to discuss things, in a meeting room. We don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to actually have our own financial literacy and the basics of life and any business. So I am a big believer that this has to be a compulsory thing, although I don't like the word compulsory actually, but it has to be part of the whole formula to give them that type of thinking that will allow them to have a choice. If I don't work in education because I studied education, I have another choice, right? If I don't really make it and I don't study, whatever I wanted to do, I do have a choice to go and practice it. A lot of people who haven't gone to medical schools today do actually participate in startups that creates medical devices, and they are doing awesome, and they do flourish in that. So that's why I think this is one of the very important things that we need to give it to everyone to be able to see the outcomes. And a very simple, exercise or a very simple experience I would like to share quickly. So at MBSC, Mohammed bin Salman College today, we do have the course of Signature Learning Experience. And this is a course that teaches a practicum where you have to start a venture. There's no option. You're graded for it, and you have to go through the whole phases of starting the business, going through the feasibility, the launch at the end, and they get a small seed, to go. So no matter what was actually the result, whether the business liquidates at the end, succeeds and fails, it's about the whole experience. It's really interesting. We've got medical doctors, we've got government employees who did not really, wanted to actually do that. And now with the reporting, they're getting actually excited about the whole thing, and they say, oh, we're thinking that we might change what we're doing. So I think that's my view in a nutshell over here. It should be even taught in schools as well. And there is results of how much, change that you can actually see at a young age, and you have better choices in college, better choices in life. And we've done this in Saudi Arabia in multiple schools, so the results are there, and we have experienced it in both colleges and schools. And that's, I think we will talk about it later, the roles of government, of how to, bring this to the education system.
Okay. So for those who voted it's optional, I would love to hear from you at the end of the panel. Why do you think it should be optional? So going back to Mr. Talal, education is about thinking, training is about doing. And now we're talking about creating actual businesses. So do you think that entrepreneurship should be part of our education system or part of our TVET training system?
No. I believe we need both. Education is very important, as everyone mentioned at the beginning, that it is about mindset. We need to open the eyes and the minds of our students from middle school to high school and even in college about an option that they can take in their lives. This option is to become entrepreneurs, and it could be a career path for them. At the first, we need to create awareness in the schools about entrepreneurship. But training also is very important when it comes to those who have the qualities to become entrepreneurs, those who understand the risk of becoming entrepreneurs, those who started taking measurements and serious steps to become entrepreneurs. What we will do in the training is just only provide them with the right tools to elevate their skills to overcome the expected challenges that every entrepreneur faces.
Okay. So we need mindset and the way to run a business. We need to have it compulsory in our education system, and we need to have it as part of our education system as well as our training system. So, Professor Justin, this question is for you. Entrepreneurship is basically viewed as unpredictable, disordered, disorganized. The history showed that most of the most successful entrepreneurs were actually college dropouts. Entrepreneurship is very much action-oriented. You need to put the entrepreneur in the market. He needs to face the customers. He needs to raise funds, and he needs to actually fail in order for him to succeed. So this is the entrepreneurship style. On the other hand, we're talking about education, which is a very structured system. This is your class, here is your curriculum, you're not allowed to fail. So do you think that through entrepreneurship education, we will end up with the right entrepreneurs?
Well, I hope so. I think my microphone is working. So I think you're right. So if you look to the entrepreneurial process, it's highly unpredictable. You may have a nice idea, but you never know how and what you will end up with. But I think your question also goes back to a plea that I have to the educational systems, also actually where I'm from in the Netherlands. We also need to renew. And so you cannot renew you cannot, let's say, change the mindset and the capabilities of potential entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, while not changing also the way you teach and the way you actually educate the next generation of entrepreneurs. So that means that we also need to inspire, let's say, the teachers, and it may actually start, I agree with you, even at primary schools. Because if you ask people of the age of, or kids of the age of 6, 7, what they want to be, in my country, they want to be a firefighter or maybe a farmer. And I think no one actually tells you, I want to be an entrepreneur. So I think if you're also going to start at primary schools, inspiring young kids, maybe by providing board games or other kinds of games that they can see and play a little bit like what it is, to sell something, to get some income, and also to team up with your classmates. Then you may end up with a mindset, and you also provide a choice, and they start thinking entrepreneurship and to become an entrepreneur as a choice in your career. And that's a story I see at my house also. It's quite funny actually that my daughter, she's now 9, she actually wants to start a business. She's inspired by her mom. So my wife is an entrepreneur. She started a 3D printing company a few years ago. And I see now also, so it actually also starts at home, that my daughter is inspired. And when I came home after my work, she looked up the website Alibaba, AliExpress, and actually bought a lot of things that I needed to buy for her, because she actually agreed with her classmates to buy stuff in China and to sell it to them. So here I could see already some kind of, well, the first thing she sold everything for the same price as I have to buy it. So that was a small mistake. So I said, maybe it's better to buy it for $1 and to sell it for $1.20 or $1.50. And then we started to talk about those things like, there's income, profit, and things like that. But again, going back to your question, I think we also need to change as an educational system. We need to think more deeply about ways in which we can actually develop the mindset on the one hand by inspiring our students, but also the way we teach and the development of the skills and capability that also Katie was talking about. And so it's not sitting there in a classroom, no, it's really going out. That's why we invest a lot in relationship building with entrepreneurs in our country, with well-known entrepreneurs. They come over to the university, students team up with each other, they're going to work for companies, for fast-growing organizations. And so the way you teach also needs to change, I guess.
So you mentioned the way we teach, but what about who teaches? I mean, I'm a faculty member, we're teachers. We all come from a generation, we chose employment as a career path. And now you're asking me to pass a learning and experience, which I don't have, to the children or to the students. So do you think that teachers are the best people to teach entrepreneurship in schools and universities?
Yeah, I think also maybe probably the profile of the teacher will change. So I'm also teaching entrepreneurship courses, but we will actually also bring in external expertise from out of the university. So that could be entrepreneurs themselves, serial entrepreneurs, but it could also be experts in certain skills that we want to develop our students, like presentations or pitching. We just talked about venture capital. So they're an angel investor, so there's a lot of pitching going on, teamwork. So I think also the portfolio of the activities you want to teach, and you need to see whether to get the right skills, whether from the inside or you need to hire external experts.
So teaching is an art, so I don't think that entrepreneurs will be able to teach. And I don't think that the traditional teachers will be able to teach. So we need a new type of teachers who combine both skills.
But you can also think about applying, we talked a lot also yesterday about disruptive technologies. I think we also need to think quite carefully about how to apply new technologies in the classroom. So you may also start developing what you call serious gaming applications. And so then it's not a person teaching you, but it's a game teaching you all the ingredients and elements of entrepreneurship.
Okay, we talk about
technology, I think, is also a way forward.
Interesting. Kathy, speaking of, I've been in entrepreneurship and the Saudi entrepreneurship ecosystem for a while. I've been seeing a lot of good stuff, especially at the university level. So you can see almost every single university, either they have an entrepreneurship program or an accelerator. So there is a move on the university level. However, we need to start, as Amal mentioned, we need to start from an early age. We need to start with kids at K-12. Do we need to start from K-12? And if yes, what do we need to teach at the K-12 level, and what do we need to teach at the university level? And how do we need to teach K-12? You mentioned exploration, but also how do we need to teach at K-12 and how do we need to teach at university? And again, before I take your view, I would like to ask the audience to vote. Do you think that we can have entrepreneurs in school age? Do you think that if we introduce entrepreneurship in the school, then we can have entrepreneurs in the age of 11 to 15? So I would like to see a yes vote. Okay, well, that's interesting. No, we can't have entrepreneurs in school age. Interesting, very interesting. So the result is 100% yes, we can have entrepreneurs in school age. So, Kathy, I would like to hear from you.
Yes, well, that's incredibly encouraging, because I absolutely agree with that overwhelming vote that we should start in primary school, K through 12, And I'm very struck by Amal's comment about why do we make math compulsory when we don't make some of these other life skills part of the curriculum at school. And as Justin said, there are so many different ways to enable these. It's not so much about didactic teaching. It's about enabling people and young people to experience problem solving, to be coached and guided when they do try to become entrepreneurial. And I'm very struck by there's a lady from Stanford who heads up the Technology Ventures program there. And she is quite an advocate to say that, you know, maths and music, these are inborn traits that we encourage over time. Why can't entrepreneurialism, why can't creativity, innovation, creative problem solving, working in teams be something that we also encourage in schools? And I'm absolutely with her. And I think I'm also very struck that we don't need to stop that when we go into college. I've just been reading a review by MIT of their alumni successes. And the alumni program in MIT has delivered amazing numbers of startups, amazing number of new businesses. And it's built on 3 fundamental principles. One which is in Latin, mens e manus, hand and mind and hand, and that goes right back to the founding of MIT. Secondly, it's about teams, not individuals. They found through that 40 plus years of experience that solo entrepreneurs do not get the best results compared to teams. And thirdly, it's about developing cross-disciplinary collaboration. So thinking not only about business and management, but thinking about the technologies and the skills in engineering, etc. at the time. So I think we do need a rethink of our education, but I do think it needs to start early. Before I have grandchildren who are as entrepreneurial as anyone, just like your daughter. So I think that's a very positive way forward.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Amal, the next question is for you. So, Amal, you've been exposed heavily to the entrepreneurship culture in Saudi Arabia. Now, is the government, and we do have Talal here representing the government, so is the government supporting the development of entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia? And what kind of support do we still need, whether from the government, whether from large companies, non-profit organizations? So what other support do you think needed to develop our ecosystem in Saudi Arabia, or to develop entrepreneurs?
I think the government is leading the entrepreneurial model now. Like, everybody's inspired, you know, by what's happening in the kingdom. Like, we've been to multiple universities and multiple organizations, and everyone is saying, you know, I feel I can't keep up. We literally heard that. It's like, there's something that I have to do, but, you know, I don't know what to do, and I want to go fast. That's exactly the point. And last week I've been in multiple universities and multiple companies, and we were talking about similar topics, you know, of what to do and how to do it. And I think here's the role of the government in the education system. I think we're inspired, and they feel that there is a lot to be done to catch up, and they want to prepare, you know, their students and all of that. But some of the universities don't know how to do it. So I think that's the role where providing a model or showing, you know, how it's done. It's like, I can't say it's a manual or a formula, but how is it done? Because that's the question that's in the minds of the universities. They try to open accelerators. They're trying to open incubators. They're trying to do, you know, multiple events, for example. But is that the formula? Is that what's going to create the impact? Is that what's going to create what we're aspiring and we're looking to achieve? And I think here is the time where you can create something that every university can use, actually, and start with. And that includes not just the material, and it actually includes the people as well. How do I build my internal capacity and just rely on external resources the whole time? We say it's good to learn, and it's good to collaborate, and it's good to consult, but if I don't have my internal capacity, I'll always be reliant, you know, to other resources. So I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. And going back and commenting on Dr. Kathy's comment, on the formula of the creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation is the driver today. So here's your 3 pieces that if you include, in any educational system, in schools, in universities, in companies, that's something that you can go. And on another piece, on the private sector, what can they do? There's a very interesting example in South Africa where they actually oblige the large corporations to give about, a certain percentage of their income to actually supply and give the, the deals to small startups actually, or small and mediums. Otherwise, they will not get the governmental benefits. And they do that, and they have to do it, right? And I think, again, just in favor of the private sector, some of them are really supporting. And there's good examples, like when we were in KAUST, we had Taqaddam Sab Bank that's sponsoring a program. We had, different entities that are coming and supporting that. But again, how do we include everyone? Because they do have the money, and sometimes it's like, I don't know how to give it. And the easiest way is to give it as a grant, before the end of the year. So how do we really utilize the resources, and again, that's another role of the government, to regulate that everyone should be part of this formula, and that's how you create the ecosystem, at the end of the day. And there are best examples in the world, but I think we have a unique, formula in Saudi already. It's just a matter of how do we connect all together
And put it in
and
a framework.
put the formula
framework.
and measure the impact. So it does not become just something that what said is actually happening and people can see the results of it.
Okay, excellent. So, Mr. Talal, you're representing the government here. So, I personally, I had the pleasure to work with ATF 5 years back, and I know that they do have a lot of really good programs to support startups and entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in general. So, Mr. Talal, if you just can tell us quickly what are the government programs to support startups, and most important, how do you evaluate the success of those programs, and what other programs do we still need?
For this question, I prepared a short presentation. I promise you it won't take more than 3 minutes, about all the programs that have been initiated and developed by HRDF to support small medium enterprises. Launched in 2009. Back then we realized the importance of SMEs and the startups in the economy. We believe that SMEs and startups will create a lot of jobs. Therefore, we started from 2009 our first program, which is the subsidy program for SMEs. The objective of the program was basically to encourage Saudis to employ themselves in their own enterprises and in their own small and medium companies, and to encourage them to employ more Saudis. The program basically provides a monthly subsidy for Saudis for the first 2 years. These are the slides, maybe it's... This is the first program that I'm talking about, and it was launched in 2009 for males and females. We understand that the biggest challenge most of the startups face are basically in the first 2 years. One of the challenges is basically sustainability and income, and therefore we created this program. So far, 8,000 beneficiaries benefited from this program around the kingdom with a budget of 400 million riyals. We'll go to the second program, which is basically 9/10. Most of the entrepreneurs here in Saudi Arabia heard about 9/10. It's a digital platform that provides a lot of services for entrepreneurs, SMEs around the kingdom. I can say that it is the largest platform in the Middle East. So far we provide 7 services, and all of our services are for free. These services help a lot of SMEs and the startups. The first service is the financial solutions, and the second is Fursa, access to it. That's what Ms. Amal just mentioned. In South Africa, as she mentioned, that the rules there request from the private sector to give a bid to the small and medium enterprises. And this is what we are doing. Now we have on our platform a lot of government entities and a lot of private sector companies that are giving small transactions and bids to small and medium companies. Also, we have the Startup Accelerator and Tujjar, which is basically access to market, applications, access to freelancers, and finally, access to information. Our target for 2018 is to increase the services to 12 and to have more than 100,000 subscribers to 9/10 platform and 20,000 freelancers, 5,000 home-based businesses and 5,000 small and medium enterprises and 200 partners. Our third program is Durob. Durob is an e-learning platform developed by HRDF, and it's very well known to give training courses and also some certificates for particular courses. Durob delivered 50 different courses related to entrepreneurship, and more than 28,000 individuals benefited from these courses. Last thing is our initiative, and I'm proud to talk about it. As everyone mentioned here, like what Mr. Johnson said, that how are we going to deliver education about entrepreneurship to the students? 2 years ago, we created and developed a box to be used in the career week in the schools for high school students. This box, we named it Riyada box. Riyada is entrepreneurship. It's a beautiful engagement game for students. It gives them the opportunity to explore themselves, and it's a beautiful journey for them. We've tested it among around 60 different students, males and females, in different schools. We delivered this box to the Ministry of Education. We delivered 65, and we gave them all the rights to copy these boxes and the manuals to give to the teachers to basically train them to deliver the material in a 5-day journey to students in high school. The journey is very simple, and it is based on interactive and interaction between the students and grouping them. The journey starts at the first day to explore your options. The second day, choose your startup. The third day, develop your skills. And the fourth day, startup and sell. And the fifth day, evaluate success. This was a beautiful experience that I mentored myself, and I found it very interesting for students, and the feedback that we received is very positive.
So Justin, we're talking about a lot of great programs, and ever since the morning we're talking about entrepreneurship ingredients. And if we look at Saudi Arabia, we do have talents, we have universities, we have government support, we have VC funds, hubs almost everywhere. We're recognizing to some extent the entrepreneurs. So we do have the ingredients. However, the outcomes are still not up to our ambition, if I would say. So are we missing one of the ingredients, or is it about the recipe we're not following right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think first of all, these are of course great initiatives to start very young. So if you talk about the ingredients, and if you talk about what may come out of your entrepreneur ecosystem that you have been developing so rapidly also in this country, I think we face the same issues also in Western Europe, especially also in my country, where we had the same initiatives, similar kinds of initiatives, but what we could see is that not so many people were actually willing to start a company in the end. And what we also saw was the ambition of people to grow a firm was also relatively low. And so also, let's say from where we started the discussion about, is it some kind of a nature or nurture idea? And so the mindset versus the skill. I think the mindset here plays a very important aspect if you talk about getting and leverage, let's say, the infrastructure and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. It has to do with how people perceive entrepreneurs, the status of entrepreneurs within countries. If you are an entrepreneur, how are you perceived by others? Is that a high status job, yes or no? Or a role to be fulfilled in the society? So that could actually play a role if you talk about getting those outcomes over there. Another one could be that also Dave actually talked a little bit about is the informal networks. And so those institutions are relatively formal. The question is whether you also reach out to the right people when introducing such institutions, and whether those institutions also collaborate with each other. And for instance, what we saw is every university in my country, for instance, also set up their incubator accelerator. But what actually made success was the collaboration between those accelerators and incubators. For instance, I'm from a business school, so we teach a lot the entrepreneurial skills, but the collaboration between us as a business school and a technical university where engineering kind of activities or courses were taught was very important. And so you also need to reach out as institutions and start collaborating with each other, and also share best practices that you have, and maybe also have students participating in programs that actually have been set up by multiple institutions together. I think that's a few of those ingredients that with a recipe, with the right recipe, actually make our lives.
Okay, so two areas we need to focus on: mindset as well as informal network. So that's,
yeah, because
that's
entrepreneurship by itself, you know, it has to do, as said also earlier today, it is relatively uncertain. You have to deal with a lot of uncertainties and ambiguity. So it goes against maybe also what we are as human beings. So we like our routines, and this is also what you see at bigger corporations having a hard time to do something new. Okay. And so somehow we need to trigger people, we need to support them to make that step and to go out of their comfort zone.
Can you hear me? Yeah. The 32 million people online. There's been a lot of experiment. I have it now. There's been a lot of experiment recently across the Western countries of what they call MOOCs, massive open online courses, and they've got a very bad reputation in some senses because of a very low completion rate. So putting everything online means that you've got to change the way that you do it. It's not just about putting up a lecturer to stand and talk to the screen as they used to do in the UK in the 1950s in the Open University. It, in some senses, has to be self-directed learning. You have to, like bots, you have to be able to go in and look at different aspects. So I think you can do a lot online, but I was reading, I think that in a sense the experience that you get online has to be a combination of academia, Silicon Valley, and Hollywood. And you have to make it really entertaining, really gripping, so games and all these types of things. So again, it's about changing the way we engage people, and I think the high level of digital skills in Saudi means there is a real opportunity. But in the end, it comes down to those networks of people, and face-to-face becomes important. So perhaps you also have to run competitions, get-togethers, internships. You can't get away from the human being side. And we found at Lancaster University, I've been involved in a major program called LEAD, which is all about peer-to-peer learning. So people on the same journey, helping each other and being mentored and supported by academia or entrepreneurs.
Kamal, I would like to hear from you. What do you think the role of the universities what is the role of universities in entrepreneurship ecosystem? And maybe you can give us some examples of best practices from Babson and the way they supported entrepreneurship culture in the US.
Sure. So one of the examples that we can say right away, it's basically what they call the university-based entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? So this is one of the most common concepts, which how do you build an ecosystem inside the university that's connected to the outside community as well? So here you work, they realize the importance, of course, of entrepreneurship, the impact on the economy, the social, all of these stuff, and how do we really create that early on in the university? I have to build it internally, I have to practice it internally, so faculties need to represent that, the administration and its processes and all of that has to represent that. And everybody who actually belongs to that institution has to act in an entrepreneurial way. And I think that's the tough discrepancy that we have today, that everybody is trying to reach that formula, right? How do we really make everyone play the game, not just inside the room, inside the classroom, right? So that's one of the very important pieces. And the other important one, which, Justin have mentioned, a while ago, which is working together with other, partners outside. So it's building the community, the relationships with the private sector, with other universities, with everyone who's outside these walls. And that's how, Babson's tried to do it by working with some of the private, sector companies, bring these challenges inside the university, make the students participate, and maybe some of them will be hired. Maybe some of them will actually come up with new ideas, And to tell you the truth, as much as I really love that model, that's being done over there, and just to mention, we've done this model 2 years ago in KAUST. So it's not like we haven't really tried that, and it worked perfectly. Well, more than 12 universities participated in these corporate challenges, and they actually created solutions, and some of these students were recruited by these companies. And some of these companies are SABIC, Dow Chemicals, the Islamic Development Bank. So this is not completely new, but we want to generalize it and make every university actually play that game. So this is a long topic. I would love to talk all day, but it's your time, and you're smiling to me, so I'm going to spell back to you.
Thank you, Amal.
Thank you so much.
Talal, I'm a pro-woman, I'm a pro-youth. I think that Saudi young generation are tech-savvy, ambitious, very smart when I compare my kids to myself. And we live in a time where I think this is the best time in Saudi Arabia. Very dynamic, fast-growing country, very supportive. So do you think that entrepreneurship is the way to turn our youth assets to economic value?
I believe that entrepreneurship is very important, and it's going to play a major role in the economy. In some countries, SMEs contribute to 37% of the GDP. Our objective for 2030 to increase the contribution from SMEs to 35%. I don't believe it's going to be a big challenge, but I believe we have the ability to reach that objective. We are privileged of having a young, active population and also an educated population. This is the golden age for startups, and we see that the government have granted 72 billion riyals to support the sector. Therefore, we believe SMEs, startups are going to be also employer number one in the coming few years. If we take in consideration the economic conditions, the dependency on technology, and the changes in the labor market, we believe that most of the traditional jobs are going to be obsolete after 10 to 15 years. Who is going to replace these jobs? SMEs, startups. And that's why the government is investing a lot and supporting the SMEs, especially after the creation of the SMEs agency. So we believe yes, and we are very ambitious, and I believe our young people already demonstrated excellent examples in the local market and the startups, and we do have a lot of success stories, but that's not enough.
Thank you. Just last but not least, We're talking about the filter bubble these days. Probably the filter bubble is more applicable on the internet, but I'm wondering whether we will have a filter bubble also when it comes to entrepreneurship education. I.e., do you see that there could be a risk that the education system will filter the type of information that goes to the entrepreneurs? It could be filtered that these are the best practices that you need to follow. So this is one type of filtration. So do you see that risk? And do you, what are the other channels of teaching entrepreneurship beyond education and beyond training, just to avoid filtration?
Yeah, very good point. Your question reminds me of a meeting I had once with Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba in Hong Kong. It was quite funny because I had to introduce myself. So I'm a professor from Rotterdam, the business school. And then he said, the business school. He said, yeah, I never send my employees to any business schools around the world because they come back as frozen chickens. So this actually goes back to your question, I must say. So I agree somehow that we seem to teach the same things at all kinds of different institutions. I think what we should do, of course, is providing tools and techniques that our students can use. I think what we should not do is to filter any opportunities that they may pursue in the future. So tools should be okay, and also what I'm very keen on is to have my students think critically, to think in different ways to maybe similar issues, because it is about responding to very difficult challenges what we see around the world today. So we need to inspire our students and help them to see things in a totally different way. Rather than filtering information, we need to create a mindset of critical people that can also think, a little bit forward into the future.
So this is a very interesting topic. I've just realized that we almost came to the end. We do have 5 minutes to get questions from the audience. So whoever have a question, please raise your hand, identify your self-affiliation, and please make sure that it is a question. Mike? So we do have a question here in the front.
Right.
شكرا جزيلا للنقاش الجيد صراحه. علي الجمره درست بكالوريوس ماجستير 2 سنين شغل، استقلت قبل 50 يوم قلت عشان ادخل في العمل الحر، وباقي كثير امور من التفاصيل ما اعرفها، فانا فكري متابعه.
So your question.
My question is, now when I go to MIT, Stanford, Harvard, they always have these casual meetups. It's pizza time. Before they start the year, it's ice cream time. They just put people together, and I don't see this much in Saudi. And this is what I need as an entrepreneur. I need to exist. It can be ice cream for entrepreneurs. Just put us in one room. Let us do stuff. We'll talk. We'll network. This is really important. And for example, for the institution of entrepreneur, they have this entrepreneur courses from distance. You get it off the screen, but it's terrible because you don't get to network. You don't get to connect with other people.
So what's your question?
Networking. How can we increase networking for entrepreneurs in Saudi? If there are existing tools, please educate me and remove my ignorance.
So how can we promote informal network? So who would like to take this question? Amen.
Sure.
Yes.
All right. First of all, let's exchange contacts because we do these mashups, but and it happens a lot actually. So it's either at the college, but I think the problem they're not common. That's why we're talking about the collaboration and spreading the network. Like one of the things that we're talking about, how can we take some of the unique things that are happening to other cities, to places where entrepreneurs and other. I completely feel you. I've gone to multiple universities and that was the same request. It's like almost it felt like there's an elite, group of people that do all these cool stuffs, and the other entrepreneurs feel that we're excluded. Why not everyone is doing the same? So I think it's a responsibility that we as universities actually hold, that we need to actually initiate that. And definitely incorporate this with other, maybe private sectors, with other people that actually would be interested in doing that. So in Istanbul, I participated in events between universities and Microsoft. So Microsoft used to give us the space, bring the entrepreneurs, come and do it, just use the space. And then Microsoft employees would just come and hang out, and such amazing things could come out of this. So I do commit to do more of that, and any other person who's in universities over here will be very happy actually to organize those, over here. So let's exchange contact, definitely. So can I have another question? I think we do have.
For our speakers, we'll start with Mr. Baran Gadnan from Lebanon. Then Dr. Kathy Garner from Dr. Justin. And Abdul Khan from Al-Zaman.